The October sky over Boston hung heavy with gray clouds, as if nature itself was mourning with me. I, Martha Sullivan, 72 years old, stood motionless before the mahogany casket where my daughter Sarah rested. After 3 days of relentless crying, my tears had run dry. All that remained was a vast emptiness crushing my chest as I gazed at her serene face, skillfully made up to conceal the injuries from the accident. Beside me, my son-in-law Robert held the hand of my granddaughter Emily. The 15-year-old stared at the coffin with glassy eyes, as if unable to fully comprehend that her mother would never return. Robert maintained a solemn expression, mechanically receiving condolences from friends and family. 3 years of marriage to Sarah hadn't been enough for me to truly know him. "Grandma," Emily whispered, squeezing my hand. "Mom looks like she's just sleeping, doesn't she?" I nodded, unable to form words. That crash on Interstate 95 had taken away my only daughter, my confidant, my best friend. The drunk driver who slammed into her car had stolen my reason to go on. The minister began the service with solemn words that I could barely process. He spoke of eternal life, divine comfort, and a future reunion that seemed as distant as the stars. All I could think about were the moments we would never share again: Sunday brunches on the porch, shopping trips downtown, shared laughter while baking apple pies following my grandmother's recipe. Sarah had been my anchor since my husband James passed away 20 years ago. As a physician, she had inherited his dedication to service and compassionate outlook. She worked at a community hospital in Dorchester, treating those most in need, coming home with stories that filled me with pride. Now, all those stories were suspended, unfinished, like photographs half developed. Grace, my neighbor of many years, approached and embraced me without saying a word. Her human warmth provided a small comfort amid the devastation. We had known each other for more than 30 years, since I moved to the Beacon Hill neighborhood as a young widow with a small daughter. "You need to be strong, Martha," she murmured. For the girl, the funeral ended as the sun began to set. People gradually departed, leaving behind a trail of kind words that did nothing to ease the pain. Robert approached, placing his hand on my shoulder with a firmness that struck me as strange. "Let's go home, Martha," he said in a neutral voice. "We need to talk about how to organize everything now." Something in his tone disturbed me. This wasn't the time to talk about organizing anything, but I nodded mechanically. Whatever it was could wait. My mind was too numb to think about anything other than Sarah. The drive home was silent. Robert drove focused, his eyes fixed on the road, while Emily looked out the window, lost in her thoughts. I watched the familiar streets of Boston slide by like a silent movie, wondering how it would be possible to continue living in a world where Sarah no longer existed. When we arrived home, Sarah's absence became even more palpable. Her red coat still hung on the rack, as if waiting for her to take it to work. Her shoes, neatly arranged by the entrance. Her favorite mug, the one with blue flowers, rested by the sink with remnants of tea from the last morning we shared. That night, in the house that once overflowed with my daughter's laughter, Robert prepared coffee and sat across from me at the small kitchen table. Emily had shut herself in her room, exhausted by grief. "Martha," Robert began, drumming his fingers on the table. "Sarah didn't leave things in order. We need to talk about the house." I looked up, confused. The house? What was he talking about? I had bought this house decades ago with the insurance money after my husband passed away. "What about the house, Robert? It's too big for you to live in alone," he continued, avoiding my gaze. "I think the best thing would be to sell it. Emily can come live with me at my condo in Back Bay." A chill ran down my spine. Sell my house? The home where I had raised Sarah, where I kept every memory, every moment. "This house is mine, Robert," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I bought it almost 40 years ago. There's nothing to sell." His expression changed for an instant. A flash of something I couldn't identify crossed his face. Of course, he backtracked, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was just thinking about what's best for everyone. It must be difficult to maintain such a big place at your age." His comment, seemingly innocent, contained an insinuation that bothered me. At your age, I might be 72, but I was perfectly capable of taking care of my home. I had always been independent, even after becoming a widow so young. "I'm perfectly fine, Robert," I responded with a firmness that seemed to surprise him. "I've maintained this house for decades. I don't see why that should change now. He nodded quickly, taking a sip of his coffee. Of course, it was just a suggestion. We're all very affected by Sarah's passing. Maybe it's not the time to make important decisions. The rest of the conversation was trivial. Robert talked about pending paperwork, Sarah's life insurance, practical matters that seemed so distant and irrelevant at that moment. My mind remained trapped in that instant when I received the call from the hospital, in the grave voice of the doctor, telling me that Sarah hadn't survived the impact. That night, I couldn't sleep. Robert's words kept spinning in my head. Something didn't add up. Sarah had never mentioned anything about selling the house, or about me not being able to live alone. In fact, we had always agreed that if anything happened to her, Emily would live with me. We never explicitly discussed that possibility. No one wants to imagine burying their children, but it was a tacit understanding between us. I went out to the garden in the middle of the night, seeking fresh air. The jasmine we had planted together years ago released its sweet scent under the moonlight. I sat on the wooden bench, our favorite spot for nighttime chats, and for the first time since the accident, I cried without restraint, a deep, heartbreaking cry that came from the depths of my being. "Why did you leave, sweetheart?" I whispered to the night. "How am I going to go on without you?" Only silence answered me, a silence that would from now on be my constant companion. The next morning, while Robert took Emily to school, he insisted she should maintain her routine. I decided to look through the papers Sarah kept in her desk. My daughter had always been meticulous with important documents, a habit she inherited from me. Among bills and folders, I found a manila envelope sealed with my name handwritten on it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and several legal documents. I immediately recognized Sarah's neat handwriting. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope you never have to open this envelope, but I've always been cautious. There's something I haven't told you. 2 years ago, when I sold my private practice, I invested the money in a townhouse in Cambridge. It's in your name. I've also been saving in a bank account that you'll find detailed in the attached documents. It's $800,000 that I want you to use for yourself and for Emily. I haven't told Robert about this. Lately I've noticed behaviors that worry me. He constantly talks about money, investments, about how we could sell the house to buy something better. I've overheard suspicious phone calls. I don't want to alarm you, but I don't trust him to manage this money well. If something happens to me, please keep this secret until it's necessary to reveal it. I trust your judgment. Take care of Emily. Teach her what you taught me, that a woman's worth isn't in her silence, but in her voice. I love you, Sarah." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read and reread the letter. My Sarah, always so intelligent, so forward-thinking. She had seen something in Robert that I hadn't perceived. The deeds to the townhouse and the bank account documents were all there, everything in my name, all legal and in order. I quickly put the documents away when I heard the front door. Robert had returned. I dried my tears and hid the envelope in the inner pocket of my robe. "Martha," he called from the entrance. "Where are you?" "In the study," I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. Robert appeared in the doorway, curiously observing the open desk and scattered papers. "What are you doing?" he asked, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just organizing some things," I replied vaguely. "Sarah kept so much stuff here. You should let me handle that," he said, approaching. "It's complicated stuff, bills, legal documents. I wouldn't want you to get confused with all that paperwork." Again that insinuation that I was incapable. I felt my blood boil, but maintained my composure. "I've handled documents all my life, Robert," I said calmly. "I was a secretary at Williams & Associates law firm for 30 years, remember?" He seemed surprised, as if he had forgotten that detail of my life, or perhaps he had never cared enough to remember it. Of course, he backed off. "I just wanted to help. Did you find anything important?" "Nothing special," I lied. "Just memories." He observed me for a moment, as if evaluating me, then nodded. "All right, I'm going to prepare something to eat. Emily will be back soon." The following days were an emotional roller coaster. The pain of losing Sarah, mixed with a growing uneasiness. Robert began staying at the house, occupying the guest room. He said it was to help me and be close to Emily. But with each passing day, his behavior became stranger. One morning, I woke up to discover he had changed the lock on the front door. It's for security, Martha, he explained when I confronted him. This neighborhood isn't what it used to be. There are a lot of break-ins. I nodded, pretending to believe him, but the feeling of being trapped in my own home began to grow. Robert started organizing my medications, insisting that I could no longer do it myself. He began answering the phone before I could, opening my mail, deciding what I could eat and when. His presence became increasingly suffocating. When I wanted to go out, he always found an excuse to accompany me, or suggest postponing it. When my friends called, he would say I was resting or not feeling well enough to talk. Slowly, he was isolating me from the outside world, creating an invisible prison around me.
Emily, meanwhile, seemed distant.
The pain of losing her mother had plunged her into a melancholic silence. She spent hours locked in her room, and when she came out, she barely spoke. Robert took advantage of this situation to present himself as the concerned father, the only one capable of handling the situation. One afternoon, while I was preparing tea in the kitchen, I overheard Robert talking on the phone in the backyard. "Yes, I'm sure," he was saying, in a low but tense voice. "The old lady must have money stashed away. Sarah always talked about how cautious her mother was. Besides, the house must be worth a fortune in this neighborhood." I froze, teapot in hand. My blood was boiling in my veins. The old lady, is that how he referred to me when no one was listening? "Give me a couple of weeks," he continued. "I need to make her sign the papers, before she suspects anything. I'm already leaving traces that she's losing her memory. I hide things, and then pretend she misplaced them." My legs trembled so much I had to lean against the counter. So that was his plan. Make me appear mentally incapable to take control of my house, and perhaps, if he discovered the existence of the townhouse and bank account, that too. His cold, calculating laugh chilled my blood. This wasn't the man Sarah had initially known. Or had he always been like this, hiding his true nature, until he saw an opportunity to act? "No, it's not complicated," he continued saying. "The daughter is gone, and the granddaughter is just a confused teenager. No one will question if I declare that the old woman can no longer take care of herself. I have a doctor who will sign whatever is necessary. After that, we'll sell everything and split it as agreed." So he wasn't alone, he had accomplices. The situation was more serious than I had imagined. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I couldn't let Robert notice that I had overheard him. I had to be smarter than him. For Sarah, for Emily, for myself. But as the days passed, my determination faced increasingly greater obstacles. Robert had begun sowing doubts about my mental state, not only in Emily, but also among the neighbors. "Martha is becoming more forgetful," I heard him tell Grace one afternoon, with feigned concern. "Yesterday I found her trying to go out in her pajamas. She didn't know what day it was." Grace, my friend of so many years, seemed to believe him. Everyone seemed to believe him. His facade of the concerned son-in-law was impeccable, attentive, solicitous, always willing to help. No one saw what was really happening, how he was gradually stripping me of my autonomy, my dignity. One morning, I discovered my keys had disappeared. I searched the entire house, growing increasingly frustrated. "Have you seen my keys, Robert?" I finally asked, exhausted. He appeared with an expression of concern, so perfectly rehearsed, it was almost convincing. "Have you lost them again, Martha?" he said loudly, making sure Emily could hear from the living room. "This is the third time this week." It was a lie. I hadn't lost my keys even once. Robert was hiding them, but how could I prove it? "I haven't lost them," I insisted. "They were on my nightstand as always." Robert exchanged a meaningful look with Emily, who was watching the scene with growing concern. "Mom always said you were forgetting where you put things lately," my granddaughter commented in a soft voice. Another blow. Had Sarah said that? Or was it another manipulation by Robert? "Your mother never told me any such thing," I replied, perhaps too harshly. Emily recoiled, as if my words had hurt her. Robert rushed to embrace her protectively. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he told her. "Your grandmother doesn't want to admit she needs help. It's normal at her age." I wanted to scream, to explain to Emily that it was all a farce, that Robert was manipulating both of us. But I saw in her eyes that she wouldn't believe me, not now. Robert had planted the seed of doubt, and it was growing rapidly. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep, and called William Porter, an old family friend and trusted attorney. I had known him since Sarah studied law at university. He had been her professor and mentor. I spoke in whispers, explaining the situation, and asking to meet as soon as possible. Tomorrow at 10, at Bella's coffee shop, William responded gravely. And Martha, don't sign absolutely anything until we talk. The next day, I told Robert I was going to the market. He looked at me suspiciously. Do you want me to come with you? He asked, with false concern. No, thank you, I replied, trying to sound fragile. It does me good to walk a little. Besides, Grace will come with me. I lied. I didn't want to involve my neighbor yet. I didn't know who I could really trust anymore. As I left, I noticed Robert, watching from the window, following my movements. How far would he go to control me? Was he following me? The idea made me shudder, but I forced myself to maintain my composure. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. Bella's coffee shop was almost empty at that hour. William was already waiting for me, at a secluded table. At 60 years old, he still maintained that air of dignity and confidence that had always characterized him. He hugged me tightly when he saw me. Martha, I'm so sorry, he said sincerely. Sarah was an extraordinary woman. Tears threatened to flow again, but I contained them. It wasn't the time to break down. I explained everything. Sarah's letter, the documents, Robert's behavior, the conversation I had overheard. William listened attentively, taking notes in a small notebook. This is serious, Martha, he finally said. Robert is preparing the ground to request your legal incapacitation. If he succeeds, he could manage all your assets, including what Sarah left you. What can I do? I asked, feeling fear and anger mixing in my stomach. First, secure the documents Sarah left you. Do you have them in a safe place? I shook my head. I had hidden them in my bedroom, but if Robert was checking my things, they wouldn't be safe there. Take this. William handed me an envelope. Put the documents in here. I'll keep them in my safe. We also need to prepare a legal defense. I want you to visit Dr. Morgan. She's a neurologist and can certify your full mental capacity. That will help us. If Robert tries to claim you have dementia or some other cognitive deterioration. I nodded, internally thanking Sarah for connecting me with William. Years ago, her foresight was still protecting me even now.
And Emily?
I asked, concerned. I don't want her caught in the middle of this. She's already suffering enough from the loss of her mother. William sighed. It's complicated. Robert is her father and has legal rights over her. But if we can prove he's acting in bad faith, trying to improperly appropriate someone else's assets, that could play in our favor in an eventual custody dispute. While returning home, my mind was working at full speed. I had to be extremely careful. Robert was cunning and was weaving his web meticulously. One false step could be disastrous. As I turned the corner onto my street, I saw something that froze me. Robert's car was parked half a block away. Had he followed me? I felt my heart accelerate. Had he seen my meeting with William? If so, my situation had just become much more complicated. I decided to act naturally. I entered the bakery on the corner and bought some croissants, as if that had been my intention all along. When I came out, Robert's car was gone. Maybe it had been a coincidence, or maybe he had left after seeing me enter the bakery. In any case, I had to be even more cautious in the future. Upon returning home, I found Robert going through my drawers. He startled when he saw me. Martha, he said, feigning naturalness, I was looking for those old photos of Sarah you mentioned. Emily wants to see them. Another lie. I hadn't mentioned any photos. They're in the album in the living room, I replied, observing how nervousness crossed his face. Right, he muttered, quickly leaving my bedroom. I watched him walk away, with a mixture of anger and determination growing inside me. Robert had underestimated the old lady, as he called me. He thought it would be easy to manipulate me, control me, push me aside. But he didn't know my strength, the same strength that had allowed me to raise Sarah alone after becoming a young widow, the same strength that had sustained me through so many difficulties. No, Robert didn't know who he was messing with, and soon he would find out. That night, While we were having dinner, Robert brought up a topic that chilled my blood. Martha, I've been thinking, he began, with a falsely casual tone. This house is too big to maintain, the taxes, the repairs. At your age, you should be enjoying yourself, not worrying about these things. I like my house, I responded firmly. I don't mind taking care of it. Robert exchanged a look with Emily, as if seeking her support. Dad's right, Grandma, my granddaughter said softly. You're always complaining about how much it costs to clean it. I was surprised. I had never complained about that. Was Robert manipulating Emily too? The idea that my own granddaughter was being used against me hurt deeply. I found a perfect place, continued Robert, pulling a brochure from his pocket. It's called Golden Sunsets. It's a residence for seniors. They have doctors' activities, companionship. You'd be much better off there than alone in this huge house. I took the brochure with trembling hands. The photographs showed a modern building with smiling elderly people playing chess and knitting, a nursing home. Robert wanted to get rid of me, remove me from my home, from my granddaughter. I'll think about it, I said, trying to buy time. Robert smiled, satisfied. He probably thought he was gaining ground. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sarah's words in her letter echoed in my mind. A woman's worth isn't in her silence, but in her voice. My daughter had seen something in Robert that I was just beginning to discover. And now I had to be strong, for her, for Emily, for myself. The next morning, I visited Dr. Morgan as William had advised. After a series of exhaustive cognitive tests, the neurologist gave me a certificate, attesting to my full mental capacity. She was a serious woman, about 50 years old, who seemed to perfectly understand the situation without needing many explanations. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, as she bid me farewell. I've seen cases like yours, more times than I'd like to admit. Don't let them intimidate you. You are perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Her words gave me strength. I left the consultation with my head held high, but as I turned the corner, I saw something that left me paralyzed. Grace, my neighbor and friend of decades, was talking with Robert in the cafe across the street. The conversation seemed intense, confidential. Robert handed Grace an envelope that she quickly tucked into her purse. My heart sank. Grace, too, the woman who had accompanied me through the most difficult moments of my life, was conspiring with Robert. I walked away, before they could see me, my soul in pieces. Robert's betrayal was painful, but expected. I barely knew him. But Grace was like a sister to me. We had shared joys and sorrows, had raised our children almost together. How could she betray me like this? Upon arriving home, I locked myself in my room, with the excuse that I wasn't feeling well. I needed to think, to process the new information. Grace, my confidant, my support for so many years, was now part of Robert's plan. What had he offered her? Money? A portion of the sale of my house. The discovery added a new layer of complexity to my situation. I not only had to watch out for Robert, but also for Grace, and who knows how many more people who might be involved in his plan. I felt surrounded, cornered. That afternoon, I heard Robert talking on the phone again, this time from the study. His voice sounded irritated. We can't wait any longer, he was saying. The old lady went to see a lawyer today. Yes, I'm sure. I followed her to Bella's coffee shop. She met with an older guy, well-dressed. It has to be a lawyer. So he had followed me. The confirmation of my suspicions chilled my blood, but it also made me realize that time was running out. Robert knew I was seeking legal help, which meant he would accelerate his plans. We have to act now, he continued. Prepare the papers for the declaration of incapacity. We'll use Grace's testimony and that of the other neighbors we've already contacted. If all goes well, in a week the guardianship will be mine, and we can proceed with the sale. 1 week. I had only 1 week to counterattack. The following days were a silent war. Robert intensified his strategies. He began hiding my keys, my wallet, even my glasses, only to later find them in places where I was sure I hadn't left them. Always with witnesses, always with Emily present, meticulously building the image of a confused old woman who lost things. See Emily, he would say, with false concern. Your grandmother is forgetting where she puts things. I worry that one day she'll leave the gas on or get lost in the street. My granddaughter looked at me with growing concern. I could see the doubt in her eyes, the internal battle between believing her father and that tore me apart more than anything else. One afternoon, while Robert was out, I sat with Emily in the garden. The hydrangeas that Sarah and I had planted years ago were in full bloom, tinting the air with blue and purple. Emily, I began, carefully choosing my words. Do you remember when you were little, and your mother told you the story of the clever grandmother and the disguised wolf? My granddaughter smiled weakly, nodding. The wolf thought he could fool everyone, but the grandmother knew the truth and waited for the right moment to prove it. I continued, taking her hand. Sometimes, people aren't what they seem, my love. And sometimes, those we believe are protecting us are the ones who can hurt us the most. Emily looked at me intensely, as if trying to decipher a hidden message in my words. For a moment I saw a flash of understanding in her eyes. Grandma, she whispered, moving closer. Are you trying to tell me something about Dad? Before I could answer, the back door swung open. Robert was there, his face hardened by a tense smile. Am I interrupting something? He asked, with a falsely cheerful tone. Just chatting about old stories, I replied, maintaining my calm. Robert nodded, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. He approached and placed a possessive hand on Emily's shoulder. Come, daughter, I need you to help me with something, he said, practically dragging her into the house. That night, I heard Emily crying in her room. I wanted to go comfort her, but the door was locked from the inside. Robert was closing his circle, isolating me even from my own granddaughter. Time was running out. William had called to inform me that Robert had officially filed for guardianship, alleging my supposed mental incapacity. The hearing had been set for the following week. We had to act quickly. One night, while everyone was asleep, I snuck to Emily's room. I needed to talk to her, make her understand what was happening. I gently knocked on her door. Who is it? She asked, in a sleepy voice. It's me, your grandmother, I whispered. I need to talk to you. It's important. There was a moment of silence, and then I heard the soft click of the lock. Emily opened the door, her hair disheveled, and her eyes swollen from crying so much. Grandma, it's very late, she said, but she stepped aside to let me in. I sat on the edge of her bed, searching for the right words. I didn't want to frighten her, but I needed her to understand the seriousness of the situation. Emily, listen to me carefully, I began, taking her hands in mine. Your father is not who you think he is. He's trying to take away my house, declare me legally incapacitated. He's been hiding my things to make me appear forgetful. Emily looked at me with a mixture of confusion and fear. Why would he do that? She asked in a whisper. For money, I replied simply. Your mother left me some things before she died, a townhouse, a bank account, all to secure your future. She didn't trust Robert to manage that money if something happened to her. I showed her the copy of the letter I had kept. Emily read it in silence, with trembling hands. Mom never told me anything about this, she finally murmured. She wanted to protect you, I explained. She didn't want to put you in the middle of her suspicions about your father. But now I need you to believe me, Emily. Robert is planning to send me to a nursing home and sell everything your mother wanted us to keep for you. Emily remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. I could see the battle in her eyes, the pain of having to choose between her father and her mother's memory, between the lies she had been hearing and the truth I was now revealing to her. Do you have proof? She finally asked, with a voice that sounded much more mature than her 15 years. Yes, I answered, taking out my phone. I've been recording some of his conversations. Listen. I played the recording where Robert was talking to someone about selling the house and the townhouse, about how he was making me appear mentally incapable. Emily's expression gradually changed from disbelief to horror, and finally to determination. I believe you, Grandma, she said when the recording ended. What can we do? I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Emily believed me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I have a lawyer, a friend of your mother, I explained. We're preparing our defense for the hearing. But we need more evidence. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Dad has an office at home, she said. That's where he keeps all his papers. Maybe there's something that can help us. It would be dangerous for you to look there, I replied, concerned. If he catches you, he won't catch me, she affirmed confidently. I know his schedules better than anyone. Besides, he trusts me. He won't suspect anything. I didn't like the idea of involving Emily in something so risky, but I understood that she needed to do something, needed to be part of the solution. After all, it was her future that was also at stake. Be very careful, I told her, hugging her tightly, and remember, no matter what happens, I love you and I'll always be here for you. I love you too, Grandma, she replied, returning my hug. And I miss Mom so much. Me too, my love, I whispered, my voice breaking. Me too. The next morning, during breakfast, I noticed that Emily was behaving differently, more attentive to her father, more submissive. I understood she was playing a role, earning his trust to be able to access his documents. She was clever, like her mother. Robert, however, seemed worried about something. He constantly checked his phone, answered calls in whispers, and his usual confidence seemed to have diminished. Had some problem arisen with his plans? Everything okay, Dad? Emily asked with feigned innocence. Yes, of course, Robert replied, quickly putting away his phone. Just some work matters. But I could see that something was troubling him. Perhaps William was making progress with our legal defense, or maybe one of his accomplices had backed out. Whatever the reason, his nervousness gave me hope. That afternoon, while Robert was out, Emily took the opportunity to search his office. I kept watch from the door, my heart in my throat, fearing he would return unexpectedly. Grandma, Emily whispered after a few minutes, look what I found. She showed me a document with a real estate agency letterhead. It was a draft contract for the sale of my house, dated for the week after the guardianship hearing. Robert had already arranged the sale, confident that he would obtain legal guardianship over me. There's more, Emily continued, showing me another paper, a printed email from a doctor. It says something about signing a certificate of incapacity without having performed an evaluation. It looks like Dad paid him to lie. I took the documents with trembling hands. They were exactly the evidence we needed, concrete proof that Robert was planning a fraud. We need to take this to William immediately, I said. But we have to be careful. If Robert discovers we took these documents, we can take photos of them, Emily suggested, pulling out her phone. That way, he won't notice they've disappeared. It was a good idea. Emily photographed each document in detail, making sure to capture signatures, dates, and any relevant information. Then, she put everything back exactly as she had found it. You're very smart, I told her proudly when we finished. Your mother would be very proud of you. Emily smiled, but the sadness was still present in her eyes. Sometimes I feel like I can hear her, she confessed, as if she were guiding me, telling me what to do. I hugged her, feeling tears well up in my eyes. She will always be with us, my love, in our hearts, in our actions, in every decision we make. I sent the photographs to William that same night. His response was immediate. We had a solid case. With this evidence, we could not only dismiss Robert's request for guardianship, but also file charges for attempted fraud and falsification of medical documents. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling of calm. For the first time since Sarah's death, I felt I had control of the situation. Robert had underestimated the old lady, and soon he would discover his mistake. During breakfast, Robert seemed particularly nervous. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, and each time he checked it, his expression became tenser. Is something wrong, Robert? I asked innocently. Nothing you should worry about, he replied curtly. Are you sure? I insisted. You seem worried. He shot me an irritated look, but before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Robert jumped up to answer it. From the kitchen I could hear raised voices. One belonged to Robert, the other was unfamiliar. The argument seemed heated. You can't back out now, Robert shouted. Everything is already arranged. I'm sorry, but I can't do it, the other voice replied. It's too risky. Falsifying a medical certificate is a serious crime. I paid you well for it, Robert insisted, and I'll return the money, but I won't go ahead with this. The door closed with a loud bang. Robert returned to the kitchen, his face contorted with fury. Seeing Emily and me watching him, he tried to compose himself. A misunderstanding with a colleague, he explained, forcing a smile. Nothing important, but I knew what I had just witnessed. The doctor who had agreed to falsify my certificate of incapacity had backed out. Robert's plan was beginning to crumble. That same day, I received a call from William. He had presented all our evidence to the court and requested a protection order on my behalf. The guardianship hearing would be moved up due to the new evidence presented. Get ready, Martha, he warned me. Robert won't give up easily. When he feels cornered, he could become dangerous. His words proved prophetic. That night, Robert burst into my room, visibly upset. What have you done? He confronted me. Have you been snooping around my things, talking to lawyers? I don't know what you're talking about, Robert, I replied, trying to maintain my calm, despite the fear coursing through me. Don't play innocent, he growled, moving threateningly closer. The court has notified me that new evidence has been presented, evidence you could only have if you'd been going through my private documents. I backed away, trying to put distance between us. Perhaps you should ask yourself why that evidence is so incriminating, I responded, finding a courage I didn't know I possessed. Perhaps you should ask yourself what Sarah would think of what you're doing. The mention of Sarah seemed to enrage him even more. Sarah is dead, he spat cruelly, and you'll soon be in a nursing home, where you can't interfere with my plans. At that moment, the door burst open. Emily stood there, her face pale, but determined. Get away from my grandmother, she shouted. I heard everything, and I recorded it. She held up her phone, showing that she had indeed been recording the conversation. Robert froze, staring at his daughter with a mixture of surprise and fury. Emily, you don't understand, he tried to explain, completely changing his tone. Your grandmother is confused. I only want what's best for her, for us. You're lying, Emily replied firmly. I've seen the documents, Dad. I know what you're planning to do, and I won't allow it. The determination in my granddaughter's voice filled me with pride and hope. In that moment, I saw Sarah in her, the same strength, the same integrity. Robert looked around, like a cornered animal. Then, without another word, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. We need to call William, I said immediately. Robert might do something desperate. Emily nodded, dialing the lawyer's number with trembling hands. While we waited for his answer, we heard noises coming from Robert's room. He seemed to be packing hastily. He's leaving, Emily murmured, with a mixture of relief and sadness. Minutes later, we heard the front door close, and the sound of his car driving away. Robert had fled, probably aware that his plan had been discovered, and that he would face legal consequences. William arrived an hour later, accompanied by a police officer. We showed them the recording Emily had made, and explained what had happened. The officer took notes of everything, and assured us they would look for Robert. He's attempted to commit serious fraud, the officer explained. Falsification of medical documents, attempted misappropriation, possible elder abuse. These are serious charges. That night, Emily and I stayed together in the living room, too shocked and agitated to sleep. My granddaughter curled up next to me on the sofa, as she used to do when she was little. Grandma, she whispered, what's going to happen now? I don't know exactly, my love, I answered honestly, but we'll face it together, as Sarah would have wanted. The next morning, the guardianship hearing was cancelled, given that Robert, the petitioner, had disappeared. William informed me that the police were looking for him, but that he had probably crossed into Canada. He's a coward, Emily commented bitterly. He always was. I couldn't contradict her. Robert had proven to be exactly that, a coward who tried to take advantage of a family's vulnerability and mourning. The following days were a time of adjustment and healing. Grace tried to apologize, explaining that Robert had deceived her, promising her money in exchange for her testimony. I listened, but the broken trust couldn't be so easily repaired. I understand you were led by greed, Grace, I finally told her. But after 30 years of friendship, I expected more from you. She left with her head down, Aware that our relationship would never be the same, I decided to sell the Beacon Hill house. There were too many painful memories there now. Emily and I moved to the Cambridge townhouse that Sarah had purchased. It was smaller, but cozy, and filled with light, like a new beginning for both of us. One afternoon, as we were unpacking the last boxes in our new home, Emily found an old photograph. Sarah, about 5 years old, sitting on my lap, while I read her a story. "She looked so much like you," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "Not just physically. She had your same intelligence, your same determination." Emily smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Grandma," she said, hugging me. "Thank you for fighting, for me, for Mom, for yourself." I hugged her tightly, feeling that in this small body resided the continuation of Sarah, her living legacy. "Your mother would be very proud of you," I whispered. "I am." With the money Sarah had left me, I created a trust fund for Emily, securing her college education and her future. I also donated a portion to a foundation that helped elderly women who were victims of financial and emotional abuse. I wanted Sarah's foresight to help others who might not have the same strength or resources to defend themselves. I resumed old hobbies I had abandoned: knitting, gardening in the small terrace of the apartment, reading novels I had postponed. Emily joined a theater group at her new school and began to smile more often. Slowly we were rebuilding our lives. One night, as we were having dinner, Emily asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Grandma, do you think we'll ever be able to forgive Dad?" I set my fork down on my plate, carefully considering my response. "Forgiveness is a journey, Emily, not a destination," I finally said. "We can't force it. It has to come naturally. Maybe someday we'll be able to forgive, not for him, but for ourselves, to free ourselves from the burden of resentment." She nodded, thoughtful. "Mom always said that holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she commented with a small smile. I laughed softly. "Yes, that sounds like something Sarah would say." She was wise, as you're being now. Robert was finally located in Toronto. 6 months later, he was extradited and faced charges for attempted fraud and document falsification. Emily decided not to see him during the trial, a decision I completely respected. "I can't face him," she explained to me. "Not after everything he tried to do to you, to both of us." The trial was brief. With all the evidence against him, Robert had no choice but to plead guilty. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, though he would likely be out earlier on good behavior. The news reached us while we were sharing tea on the terrace of our apartment. Emily remained silent for a long time after hearing it. "What are you thinking about?" I finally asked. "Mom," she answered. "About how she saw through him when no one else could. About how she protected, even knowing she might not be here." I nodded, feeling the same admiration for my daughter's foresight. "Your mother was always extraordinarily intuitive," I said, "and brave. When she noticed something wasn't right, she didn't hesitate to act to protect us." "I want to be like her," Emily declared with determination. "I want to study law, like she did. I want to help people who are in situations like ours." I smiled, feeling immense pride for this young woman, who despite all the pain and betrayal, still found the strength to look forward, to turn her experience into something positive. "You'll be an exceptional lawyer," I assured her, "and Sarah will be by your side every step of the way, just like me." Sometimes, on quiet nights when Emily was already asleep, I would sit on the terrace and look at the stars, thinking about Sarah, about how, even knowing she might not be present, she had taken all precautions to protect us. Her love transcended death, manifesting in every detail she had foreseen. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered to the sky, "for your foresight, for your strength, for teaching me that one is never too old to fight." Time continued to advance, the seasons changed, and we changed with them. Emily grew up to become a brilliant young woman who decided to study law, like her mother. I aged with dignity, always aware of the gift Sarah had left me, not just the properties and money, but the opportunity to be part of Emily's life, to see her flourish. One afternoon, years later, as Emily was packing her bags for her first semester at Harvard Law School, she found an old box we hadn't opened since the move. Inside was a photo album that Sarah had meticulously put together her life from childhood to adulthood, with small handwritten notes on each page. On the last page, there was a photo of the three of us, Sarah, Emily and me, smiling under the sun of the summer before the accident, and beneath it, in my daughter's elegant handwriting, a phrase that summed everything up. True love is foresight. It's caring for those we love even when we might not be present. It's leaving a legacy of strength. No money. Emily and I embraced, crying and laughing at the same time. In that moment, I felt that Sarah was there with us, completing the circle of 3 generations of strong women who didn't surrender to adversity. Now, as I watch Emily defend cases similar to ours, helping other elderly people protect themselves from abuse, I know that Sarah's true legacy wasn't the properties or the money. It was teaching us that truth always finds its way, that love is stronger than greed, and that it's never too late to raise your voice and claim what is rightfully yours. And although I know that someday I'll reunite with Sarah, it comforts me to know that Emily will continue our legacy, that of women who refused to be silenced, who protected what they loved, and who found in adversity not an end but a new beginning. Because as Sarah wrote in her letter, a woman's worth isn't in her silence, but in her voice, and our voice, the voice of all 3 of us, will resonate long after I'm gone, in every woman who finds the strength to defend herself, to fight, to prevail. This is our story, that of a grandmother, a daughter, and a granddaughter, the story of an inheritance that transcended the material to become a legacy of lumic strength and dignity, a silent inheritance that when necessary, knew how to raise its voice, to protect what is most valuable, family. And you, who have come this far with me, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you fight or would you resign yourself? Would you raise your voice, or would you keep silent? Because sometimes, the most important battle is the one we wage against those we believed would protect us, but who end up being our greatest adversaries. In life, as in this story, appearance, deceit, and sometimes, the greatest strength comes from where we least expect it, from an elderly woman who refuses to be silenced, from a granddaughter who finds her voice amid pain, or from a mother who, even from beyond, continues to protect those she loves.